Okay, we left off in the voice of Saruman. We're going to try to finish this chapter fairly quickly. If I remember correctly, on Friday we discussed Saruman appeals 3 times to Theoden. And in each of the first 2 times, somebody else replies. In the first appeal to Theoden, Gimli replies. Okay? And Saruman loses his cool a little bit, tells peace and calls him by his name and such, tells him what valiant deeds he's done. The second time, Eomer replies, and he essentially does the same thing, calls him a gun. You're not there to think, you're there simply to kill whom your lord tells you to kill. But should you become a king, he says, you'll have to think policy and diplomacy and all that kind of stuff. In the third time, he gives this appeal, and Theoden finally replies. And Theoden replies saying, bottom of page 580, we will have peace, we will have peace, we will have peace. Okay? And he finishes, when you and all your works have perished. Okay? And I kind of started to address what's wrong with that statement. We will have peace when you and all your works have perished.
He's only thinking about Sauron.
Louder?
He said, what's wrong with that statement?
Yeah.
Well, he's just saying, when Saruman's, stuff is gone, they'll have peace, but there's still, Sauron.
Okay, true. Can all his works perish? Or, let me put it this way. What does Theoden mean by all Saruman's works? Does he mean just his creation of his own race of orcs? Because that's kind of what Saruman's orcs are. They're different than the orcs in Mordor. Does it mean his creation of the engines and machines of war that he's done in Isengard? I think that's probably what he literally means. But what's the problem with limiting it to that? Well, those all have consequences. And he can't erase those consequences. Okay? And he says, I see exactly what you're, trying to do, blah, blah, blah. So then Saruman totally loses his cool and reveals his real, true self, right? And then he appeals, he makes one kind of final appeal. To whom? Who does he then address? Gandalf. Okay? And notice, we're told, bottom of page 581, so great was the power that Saruman exerted in this last effort that none that stood within within hearing were unmoved. Okay, who does the none include? That's everyone. Okay, who's everyone right there in that scene? First and foremost, Gandalf. That is, Saruman even, Gandalf's kind of like, damn, you're good. He even thinks, wow. Okay? And notice the effect that we're told Saruman's speech has on everyone else, not including Gandalf, because of what Gandalf's going to do in just a moment. We're told, top of page 582, it was inevitable that they should make alliance. Gandalf would ascend into the tower to discuss deep things beyond their comprehension in the high chambers of Orthanc. The door would be closed, they would be left outside, dismissed to await allotted work or punishment. Even in the mind of Theoden, the thought took shape, he will betray us. He will go. Right? That's pretty powerful. What breaks the spell? Gandalf laughs. He laughs. I can't remember who said it. Some famous writer, thinker said, the devil is an ass. How do you quote unquote mock the devil? You laugh at him. You laugh at evil. You make fun of it. That's why parody and satire are so powerful. Okay? There's a difference between parody and satire, by the way. Satire has as an ultimate goal to reform the person who's being satirized, to get that person to go, oh, I've been an idiot, and to change behavior. Parody is designed simply to break down and destroy, okay? To just annihilate, right? So, Gandalf laughs. The spell is totally broken. He says, understand one another? I fear I am beyond your comprehension. That is, as I can't remember which medieval thinker it was. Might have been Abelard. It was some famous, wasn't Thomas Aquinas. I've kind of got his name, but it's not coming all the way out. A famous medieval thinker said, God is that beyond which the highest thought can attain. You can't think up God on your own. It's called the ontological proof. That is the proof for God's existence. Because we couldn't come up with that idea on our own, okay? What's Gandalf saying? You can't even conceive of me, what I am now. Remember earlier he said, I am Saruman as he should have been? That's Gandalf saying, if Saruman had done what he should have done, he would have become beyond my comprehension, right? But you, Saruman, I understand now too well. And what does he then do or say or offer? He gives him a second chance. Okay? He says, bottom of page 582, you need not fear for your skin. I do not wish to kill you or hurt you, as you would know if you really understood me. And I have the power to protect you. I am giving you a last chance. Little clue here, or hint here, it's not the last chance he gives them. He gives them another one later on. Much later on. Okay? So, they kind of talk back and forth. Gandalf keeps giving him opportunities. Opportunities for what? Opportunities to do what? Think of what Gandalf tells Frodo in that chapter, The Shadow of the Path, about Gollum. He wants Saruman to find his healing. How do we know that? We go to the second to the last chapter of the entire novel, and we see what Frodo essentially offers Saruman. Because Frodo, in that scene, kind of has taken the place of Gandalf. Right? He wants Saruman to turn away from all of his plotting, all of his devising, all of his conspiring, and to become good and useful again. Right? But he doesn't. Bottom of 583. Saruman leaves, and Gandalf says, I didn't give you leave to go. And he commands him to come back. Come back, Saruman, said Gandalf in a commanding voice, and to the amazement of the others, Saruman turns as if dragged against his will. What kind of voice did Gandalf use? A commanding voice. If you remember, just before Gandalf fights the Balrog, he's the last one to come down from the room that they've been sleeping in and such, and he has to put a spell on the door. He said, I had to utter a word of command. Okay? What does that mean? That's magic. I think it was this class where I mentioned in the fairy story essay, Tolkien draws a distinction between magic and enchantment. Magic is the domination of wills and things. In the Harry Potter novel, it would be Wingardium Leviosa and making that phone levitate. Okay? It's domination of the thing. It's also a domination of a physical law, right? Wills, the Imperious Curse. What do you do in the Imperious Curse? Imperio. And I can make her dance on the chair, dance on the desk, hop like a bunny, whatever. Okay? It's taking the will of that person away. What's he doing here? He's dominating Saruman. Does he want to? No. It's why he gives him the opportunity to choose to do the right thing. Okay? So what does he do when Saruman turns around, comes back? Gandalf shows a smidgen of his power. I have not finished. You have become a fool, Saruman, and yet, there he is again using that word. He uses it repeatedly. And yet, pitiable. Okay? His opportunity, his offering the second chance, that's what? That's not pity. Remember when we talked about pity and mercy in that chapter, The Shadow of the Past? What's the difference between pity and mercy? Action. One's an emotion, the other is an action based on that emotion. Offering the second chance, that's mercy. Now he's saying, you are still pitiable. Someone can still look at you and feel empathy for him. Okay? But you choose to stay and gnaw the ends of your old plots. And there's a perfect example of what I've been saying about the meaning of the word ends. He doesn't mean the finalities, the completions. He means what? The purposes of your plots and such. In other words, you're still trying to figure out a way to make this plot work. So he says, behold, I am not Gandalf the Grey. See, Saruman didn't realize that at this point. He still thought Gandalf was gray. I'm not Gandalf the Grey whom you betrayed. I am Gandalf the White, who has, and there he makes it crystal clear. Before it's kind of, the first time when he tells Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli where he came back from, he says, out of thought and time. And then later he says to Wormtongue, through fire and death. And now he makes it emphatic. Who has returned from death. I died and am alive again. You have no color now. That is, you're not a wizard anymore. You're not an Istari Elvish name anymore. He's still a Maya. Gandalf cannot unmake him. Okay? All the wizards are Maiar, like Luthen Tenuviel's mother was, like Sauron is, like the Balrogs are. Okay? Those lesser supernatural beings. You have no color now. I cast you from the Order, that's the wizards, and from the Council, the White Council. Right? He breaks his staff. Why? Because that's the symbol of his power. In ancient Rome, it was the Imperium, the staff that the Caesar, the ruler, held. Okay? So, Saruman goes back, ball comes flying out, Pippin picks it up. Bottom of 584, top of 585. Let's see here. 585, let's go to there, top. Pippin asks, and what if Sauron does not conquer? That is, say Frodo destroys the ring. What will you do to him? Not Sauron, Saruman. What does Pippin's question both imply and presuppose on Gandalf's part.
Can do something.
He can do something. He has the power to do something. Moreover, he has what? The authority to do something. Remember, again, back to the chapter Shadow of the Past. Frodo says to Gandalf, "What? Do you mean to tell me that you and the elves have let him live?" That verb let, implying you gave him permission to continue living. It's in your power, it's in your authority, it's in your rights, Gandalf, to have killed him. Gandalf, I? Nothing. I will do nothing to him. I do not wish for mastery. It's not my job to dominate people, he is saying. You remember when Tolkien in the foreword talked about applicability and allegory and all that kind of stuff? If this were based on the quote-unquote real world, what would Gandalf be doing? He'd be calling all the shots. There wouldn't be any of this, I don't want mastery. It'd be, yes, I want mastery. Why? Because I can make the world into a better place, into my idea of a better place, which might not be your idea, or your idea, or your idea, or any of your ideas, or any of the 7.2 billion or however many people there are in the world's ideas. What will become of them? I cannot say. That is, what's going to happen to him? I don't know. Why? Because Gandalf does not, as he said in the Shadow of the Past, see all ends. He doesn't have what's called, I'm going to put it this way. He doesn't have Boethius, a 6th century Christian philosopher. He doesn't have Boethius's idea of God, time, and what do I want to call the rest? I'll call it providence. In providence, okay? Little brief side detour. Boethius was good friends with the Emperor Theodoric, okay? And the emperor was told that Boethius, along with others, were plotting against him. Okay? Wanted to take his power. And so the emperor has Boethius thrown in prison on a capital charge, that is, a executable by punishment by execution charge. And so while Boethius is in prison, he does die, and we're told kind of anecdotally, that is, we don't have an actual written account of how he died, but there are stories about how he died, and he died by having a rope put around his head, wrapped around his head, and tightened, and I think it was made out of leather, and wetted. If you wet leather, it shrinks. So they tie a rope around his head and pull on the ends and continually wet it until it squeezes his skull till it breaks. Okay? Pretty painful, right? So while in prison, he writes a book called, because he was a philosopher, The Consolation of Philosophy. That is, how philosophy can make you feel good during times of trouble. It's not, I read Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and I suddenly felt good. Not what he means. He means how philosophy, deep thinking on wisdom, can bring consolation during tumultuous times. What's ultimately the deep thinking of wisdom that he says? It's this. Well, what's he getting at? See, in the story that he writes, Lady Philosophy's like a goddess, comes and talks to him. She says, man, you've forgotten everything I've taught you over the years. Let's go back to first principles. Well, part of those first principles, and this comes at the end of the book, is we experience time how? Each one of us. Tick, tock, tick, right? Moment by moment. We don't experience it in great big leaps. We don't experience it by being able to look ahead 2 days and knowing exactly what's going to happen. So we experience it like this. What does that also mean? We don't see what? The future. Keep going. Do we see our place in the future? No. Do we see how my life, let's say, interacts with her life, and her life, and his life, and her life, and his life, and his life? No. What do we see? Little points. Day-to-day interaction kind of thing. So what Boethius does, he says, that's one way to look at time. That's the earthly way. There's another way to look at time. Okay? Eyeball. Beginning, end. What can help us see time differently? If we could get on a ladder and do what? Scan that way a little bit. We're not going to see all the way to the end, but we might be able to get an idea of what might be coming. But it also enables us to look backwards, right? George Santayana said, those who don't learn the lessons of history are condemned to repeat them. Right? You know, Treaty of Versailles at the end of First World War. That created the Second World War right there. It just took a long time for it to come to fruition. Okay? So what Boethius got, what Lady Philosophy got Boethius to see is, if we understood our experience from the perspective through spectacles, through the lenses that God sees, what is it? This and this don't exist. How so? Because from the bird's eye perspective, or God's perspective, how does time exist? All at once. It's what C.S. Lewis called the eternal present. Eternal, outside of time, present. Everything is now from God's perspective. Okay? Go back to what Gandalf says here. What will become? I cannot say. I grieve that so much that was good now festers in the tower. When he talks about we cannot see all ends, he's saying, you know, I can see a little ways, but I can't see here. But I have hope, he says about Gollum. Okay? And there's this very Boethian notion that undercuts and is woven, not undercuts as in knocking the feet out, but that is woven throughout this text. And that's that nothing happens by chance. Notice when the word chance is used by Gandalf and Elrond, what do they always say after that? As it is called, as some may think. They're saying, it's not chance. There is a design, Gandalf says, and not that of the ringmaker. Tolkien's getting at this. And in this context, it'd be a Ruluvatar. Okay? So, now we skip a bunch. Chapter the Palantir. What's a Palantir? Okay, what would we call it in common parlance in terms of quote-unquote magic?
Oh.
Yeah, you can go have it done today. There's a place in Murfreesboro, I think it's over off Memorial. It's a crystal ball. Okay? Crystal ball. What's it enable you to see? The future? Yes, other people have them. Today we would call this, by how we create words, it's a television. Vision to see, tele at a distance. Okay? The Palantir, or, you know, you could, one of these, because they didn't have this kind when Tolkien was alive. Right? It enables you to communicate with somebody else over a far distance. Right? but the other person has got to have one too. 7 of these originally were made. They were made by the men of Westernessa. You know, the ones that Aragorn descends from. So, this Palantir was the Palantir of Isengard in the the Tower of Orthanc. That tower was made by the men of Westernessa. Thousands of years ago. Okay? So, Pippin touched it. Gandalf took it from him. That evening, Gandalf goes to sleep, wraps it in a blanket, lays down with it, and Pippin wakes up and his fingers are itchy. He wants to see this thing again because when he held it, he saw a light in it. All right? So he goes and takes it from Gandalf, replaces it with rock, and he looks at it. What does he see? Louder? He sees the riders, the Nazgul, right? And Sauron. Sauron comes in and speaks to him. Who does Sauron think he's talking to? Frodo, the ring bearer. Where does he think Frodo is? In Isengard. He knows whose stone this is. It's kind of like, he's at a switchboard. The Isengard stone, the Minas Tirith stone, kind of thing. And he tells Pippin, tell Saruman this dainty is not for him. I will send for it. Right? And that's when Pippin kind of, and Gandalf takes him. Gandalf looks deeply into his eyes and reads what's going on in his mind and says at the bottom of 591, you have taken no harm, there's no lie in your eyes as I feared, but he did not speak long with you. A fool! Going back to fool of a tooth. Next time throw yourself in, A fool, but an honest fool you remain, Peregrine Took. Wiser ones might have done worse in such a pass. You have been saved, and all your friends too, mainly by good fortune, as it is called. The as it is called means it's not really good fortune. It's not really chance. All right? You cannot count on it a second time. That last sentence, that's an indication to us that this is what Tolkien, in the fairy story, wants us to understand as a eucatastrophe. It's the good and sudden turn that you can never count on to happen again. Why is this a good and sudden turn? What idea has now been planted in Sauron's mind? We've got him. We've got the ring bearer. Which means we've got the ring. But it's wrong. It's a wrong thought. So Gandalf gives the Palantir to Aragorn. And he tells him, don't be hasty, don't be rash, don't do anything foolish. And he's like, dude, it's me. When have I been, hasty or rash, etc.? Okay? So, Gandalf and Pippin leave. Why? So we've got Gandalf, Pippin, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Frodo and Sam are still off on their own, and Boromir is still dead. Okay? Why do Gandalf and Pippin leave? They go to Minas Tirith, right? They go for 2 reasons. One, Minas Tirith needs to be warned. Sauron's now going to probably start unleashing all hell. Okay? 2, it's a very seemingly insignificant reason. He's got to get Pippin as far away from the Palantir as possible. Because as long as Pippin is in some kind of proximate location to it, he's going to try and look at it again, even though he knows what it does now. So, they ride off to Minas Tirith. What happens to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli? We don't know at the end of Book 3, right? But fortunately, Book 3 is joined with Book 4. So we don't, lose a lot. Except, when do we pick up with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli again? Not until Return of the King. So you finish Two Towers, and you never hear anything about Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli again. Or Merry and Pippin. And if you go back and look at the note on the text, in terms of when the books are published, people had to wait something like, I think it was 11 months from finishing the Two Towers to what happens next. Just for a moment. Jump to the very end of Two Towers. What happens?
Frodo was taken.
Frodo's taken. Sam thinks Frodo's dead, and then he realizes, shoot, he's not dead. Frodo's taken by the orcs in Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, going to be taken to Sauron, and Sam's like, I'm such an idiot, I'm such a moron, and then you have to wait 11 months to find out what's going to happen. What do you want to happen as soon as that next book comes out? You want to open it, and Frodo and Sam? What does Tolkien do? Anybody know? We don't go to Frodo and Sam. We go back to Gandalf and Pippin in Minas Tirith. It's like, who the hell cares at that point? We want to know what's going to happen. And we got to go through quite a bit before we get back to Frodo and Sam. So, the taming of Smaug, which we're going to skip a lot, just because we don't have time. So, Smaug, they see Smaug, he comes down the cliffside, Sam and Frodo are ready there to pounce on him, and he drops, and they do pounce, okay? Sam gets bit on the shoulder, 6:14, 6:15. Sam says, let's tie it up so it can't come sneaking after us no more. Because Frodo's thinking, what do? We can't bring him with us to Mordor. Sure you can. Sam, let's tie him up with what? What rope? That the elves made. Okay. What does this rope do to Gollum? Burns. It stings. Why? Because the rope is like pure good. And Gollum's not pure evil, but he's getting there. Right? Gollum says it would kill us. Frodo, no. If we kill him, we got to kill him outright. In other words, we can't do any of this passive-aggressive killing. We can't just tie him up and let him starve to death. We got to slit his throat, gut him. It's got to be an active death. Okay? And he hasn't done us any harm. Sam, hasn't he? Rubbing his shoulder, top of 6:15. He meant to, and he means to. He wanted to do us harm, and he plans to do us harm. Throttle us in our sleep. What's Sam getting at? George Bush changed the, how do I want to put this? The philosophy of the United States, kind of, when it comes to war fighting, starting war, etc., after 9/11. Why did we, ostensibly, on the surface level, why did we invade Iraq in 2003? Did it have anything to do with 9/11? No, it did not. It had nothing to do with 9/11. It was all because it was thought, the CIA said, Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Okay? Chemical, biological, possible nuclear. So, Russia has those. Britain has those. France has those. China has those. Israel has those. We've got a hell of a lot of them. Pakistan now has them. India now has them. So, Bush, the White House, Defense Department, came up with the idea of the preemptive strike. Hit them, what? Before they hit us. It's like Minority Report. if you're familiar with the film or the book, the Heinlein book, I think it's Heinlein, that it's based upon. I'm going to arrest you before you commit a crime. The only problem with that constitutionally is there's a constitutional problem. You can't be arrested until you've committed a crime. Okay? What's Sam getting at? Don't give me any of this do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's do unto others before they do unto you. He wants to kill us. I say we kill him first. Frodo, I dare say, whenever you hear that, I dare say you're right. He does. He is planning on killing us. But what he means to do is another matter. We can't strike until he strikes. Okay? And then Frodo hits the rewind button in his mind and plays the conversation with Gandalf. And he finishes it with, as you see, I will not touch the creature, for now that I see him, I do pity him. And I think one of the reasons he pities him after seeing him is what else does he see? A lot of critics have written about this. Little Frodo. Shadow Frodo, in terms of Jungian psychology. This is his shadow being. This is his doppelganger. Frodo could easily become this. Okay? So, what does he get Gollum to agree to? Showed him how to get to Mordor? What must he agree to before he agrees to do that? He's got to serve him. Okay? And Gollum says, I'll make a promise on the precious. And Frodo's like, dude, how can you do that? You know what that means. And so, Gollum says, page 618, we will swear to do what he wants. Yes, yes. Swear, Smaug will swear on the precious. Notice, we will swear, and then he goes to Smaug. Why Smaug, and why is it titled The Taming of Smaug, not The Taming of Gollum? Gollum's stupid, okay. What else?
Is it just the Smeagol part from coming out there now?
What is the Smeagol part of him?
The human part?
Not human.
What's the deepest part of them?
The deepest.
Get over it.
It's his true self. Smeagol is who he is. Okay? Gollum is the name that's given to him by others later. For what reason? Because of the sound he makes in his throat. Okay? So we get this dichotomy between Smeagol and Gollum. As we go from here forward, can you make any comments about the Smeagol part versus the Gollum part? What kind of comments?
No.
Which is worse? Morally worse. Which makes the worst choices? Which wants to hurt Frodo? Gollum. The Gollum part. Why? Because the Smeagol part gradually died, or is in the process of dying, over all the long years that Gollum had the ring. That part is repressed and pushed down. We're going to see a part in this book, towards the end, where the real Smeagol almost fully comes forth. The real Hobbit. And Sam squishes it like a bug. Just totally annihilates it. Okay? So, he agrees. And this is where Frodo could have used a good course in business negotiation. Because the contract that Gollum swears to has a huge flaw. Has what we would call today in political terms, like in making laws and such, a loophole. What's the loophole that Frodo doesn't catch? What does Gollum swear to? He swears that, we promises, bottom of 618, notice it's no longer we, because when Gollum speaks, it's we. Who's the we? Is it Gollum and Smeagol? It's Gollum and the ring. But when Gollum says I, that's the Smeagol nature. Okay? He says, I will serve the master of the precious. Good master, good Smeagol, Gollum. Where's the problem? The master of the precious is not named. This is where Frodo should have said, okay, I'd like to make a little emendation here. You will serve the master of the precious, comma, a.k.a., also known as Frodo Baggins, a.k.a. Frodo Underhill, the name that Tom Bombadil gave him, you know, who lives at, when he's home, number 4, Bagshot Row, a.k.a. Bag End, the Shire, the Western Middle Earth, Arda. In other words, you keep specifying who the individual is in the contract. You ever buy a house, you're going to spend a half hour of your life just signing away papers, where you're going to keep putting your name and your initials, like on a stack, literally a stack of papers, about 100 sheets thick. Okay? But Frodo doesn't do that. So what immediately starts coming into apparently Gollum's mind? Well, we're the master of the precious. Then we serve ourselves. Gollum, you know. So we get the passage of the Marshes. Page 625. So what's he agree? He agrees to take him to the Black Gate, the only known entrance into Mordor, and it's literally a great big giant black gate. Okay? But they've got to go through the passage of the Dead Marshes. What are the Dead Marshes? Okay? Battle many years ago. It was talked about in the chapter of the Council of Elrond. This is the Gladden Fields, where there was a huge battle outside Mordor, okay, where men, elves, and orcs all died. Okay. Page 625. They're making their way, and we're told at the middle of that page, the hobbits were now wholly in the hands of Gollum. In other words, their whole fate rests with him. Next paragraph. Frodo asks, how do we shape our course now, Smeagol? Okay. How do we shape our course? They leave the Emyn area, and now they get to the marshes. What's the problem with marshes? You don't have them much in Tennessee. You're not in parts of Georgia, parts of Florida, okay, where you have firm track and then soft, spongy parts. Well, the soft, spongy parts you can step in and sink. They look like they're firm, but they're not. How do we shape our course? What's he mean? Think of that line I have here. How do we make our path forward? What's he assuming? We shape our course. We make our decisions and say, I am the master of my destiny, the captain of my fate, and I will do X, Y, Z. Okay? Must we cross these evil-smelling fins? Gollum, no, we don't need to. Not if hobbits want to reach the dark mountains and go to see them very quick. No, we could go back and around. Okay? But they go through them. Let's see here. And they find their way through, and Sam sees these lights around them in the marshes. And he's like, what is this, Gollum? This is page 627. And Sam trips, stumbles over a root, and he comes face to face with one of these puddles. And he looks at it, bottom of 627. For a moment, the water below him looked like some window glazed with grimy glass, through which he was peering. Wrenching his hands out of the bottom, he sprang back with a cry. There are dead things, dead faces in the water. Dead faces. Gollum laughed. Yes, the dead marshes. That is their name. Sam asks, who are they? Frodo, I don't know, but I've seen them too, in the pools when the candles were lit. They lie in all the pools, pale faces, deep, deep under the dark water. I saw them grim faces and evil and noble faces and sad, many faces proud and fair, weeds in their silver hair, blah, blah, blah. And Gollum talks about the battle, okay? Little interesting biographical side note. We have written accounts from survivors, men who fought in World War I, in the fields of France, describing almost identically these experiences. That is, they're trying to go from a trench here to a trench over there, which means they have to come up out of the trench, crawl like beetles across the wet, muddy, puddle-ridden ground to get to the next trench. The trench warfare, 1916, 17, and 18. And we have written accounts of guys saying, I scrambled forward, shells are falling, so I keep dropping, and I look, and there in a puddle is a face with no body. The head had been decapitated. And it happened to more than one. We have at least, I think, about 4 or 5 different accounts by World War I vets talking about this. So, that's pretty eerie. So they make their way across, and let's see here. 632, 633. They get almost to Mordor, almost to the Black Gate. They're on the dead land outside Mordor. And there are these slag heaps. Slag is, what's left over after processing ore and such. It's just totally worthless material. And they camp, and Frodo slides down one of these hillsides in the middle of the night. Sam wakes up and he sees Gollum down next to Frodo, and he overhears this conversation between Gollum and Smaug, okay, on the bottom of 632 and 633, where Smaug argues against what Gollum wants to do. And Smaug refers to Frodo as the nice hobbit, the good hobbit. But Gollum says neither of them are nice or good. Why? Because the Bagans took it. Okay? And that's when Smaug, bottom of 633, mentions she might help. No, not that way. Smaug replies, yes, we wants it. All right? So Sam intrudes, kind of, and Gollum pretends like nothing happened. Black Gate is closed. So what debate kind of do they have at the Black Gate? I mean, they get there and the gate's closed. And Frodo's like, this isn't any good. How are we going to get into Mordor there? I mean, you go knock on the door and say, hi, my name's Frodo. I've got the ring. I want to destroy it. Can you show me how to get to Mount Order Druid? Gollum's like, don't be foolish, don't be stupid. Is there another way? And he finally presses him. He says, yes, there is another way. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask. Is it guarded? And he doesn't really. He said, well, yeah, I mean, it's guarded, but, there's guarded and there's guarded. So he agrees to take them by the other way. He doesn't name it. Okay? And so they head south. Let's see here. Chapter 4 of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit. They make their way to an area called Ithilien. Frodo doesn't know it's Ithilien. He just knows that where they are now, there are trees and there are plants and there are animals, and it's living and growing and alive. Right? And Sam notices What about Frodo? What has happened to Frodo over the last few weeks? He's gotten thin. He needs some fattening up. Frodo needs some real food. So Sam asks Gollum, go kill some rabbits, conies. Bring them back. Sam's going to make Frodo a nice stew. He's going to fatten him up. But in order to make a nice stew, what must he do? Got to start a fire. You have to have a way to heat it, to cook the meat. The fire creates smoke. The smoke draws the men of Ithilien. Okay? Pages 657 and following. So they capture Frodo and Sam. Notice Gollum isn't there. Right? And Faramir talks with them. They mention Boromir, page 658. And Faramir asks Frodo, are you familiar with this little verse? Seek for the sword that was broken in Imladris it dwells. Frodo's like, yeah. And he mentions Aragorn. Okay, what's Isildur's bane? Faramir asks, that is hidden. Notice the voice. That is hidden. It's passive voice. Frodo doesn't say, I can't tell you. Not initially, at least. Doubtless it will be made clear in time. Okay? So, they start to make their way. And they get involved in a little skirmish. Top of 661. Sam sees, bottom of 660, top of 661. Man sees a man fall, crashing through the trees. Came to rest in the fern a few feet away, face downward, green arrow feathers sticking from his neck. Scarlet robes were tattered, corselet of overlapping brazen plates rent and hewn. His hand is still clutching the hilt of a sword. It was Sam's first view of a battle of man against man. He did not like it much. He was glad he could not see the dead face. This is really important, I think. He wondered what the man's name was and where he came from. And if he was really evil of heart, or what lies or threats had led him on the long march from his home, and if he would not really rather have stayed there in peace. All in a flash of thought. What is Sam doing there? Thinking there? Or what does that description of Sam's thought process tell us? Being empathetic? Yeah. What else? This guy is not what? To quote Frodo, just an enemy who deserves death. Notice, Sam wonders what his name is. Why is that significant? It's a lot harder to kill somebody you know. Someone who has a name. He wonders, was he really evil of heart? Or had he been lied to? Had he been threatened? Was he forced to do this essentially against his will? Okay. Sam is humanizing this guy rather than demonizing him. So they go to the window on the west. We've only got a couple minutes. Page 668. Faramir lets out that Boromir's dead, tells them what he saw, the boat, the cloven horn of Denethor and such. Frodo, thinking, if Boromir is dead, then what else happened? Everybody else is dead. He and Sam are the only ones left alive. I mean, Gandalf already died. And if Boromir died, then mighty warrior that he was, there's little chance the others could have made it. 668. Frodo, no, I did not know of it, but the day when you heard it blowing, if your reckoning is true, was the day when we parted, when I and my servant left the company. Will you not put aside your doubt of me and let me go? I am weary and full of grief and afraid. But I have a deed to do or to attempt before I too am slain. In the more need of haste, if we two halflings are all that remain of our fellowship. What's Frodo expressing there in that little speech? Where is his mind already starting to go? Notice, before I too am slain. Yeah, this is despair. I gotta try, but we're gonna die anyways. But I gotta try at least. Go back, Faramir, valiant captain of Gondor. Defend your city while you may. And let me go where my doom takes me. In other words, go off and defend Minas Tirith. You're not going to win, but you can die trying. It's a heroic spirit. It's fighting on even in the sure face of death, rather than, throwing up your hands and surrendering. Okay? But he says, Faramir says, I don't think your friends are all dead. See, what did Frodo not pick up on? And I know we're about a minute over. Somebody put Boromir in the boat. Somebody piled all the stuff around him. Somebody at least is still alive. Okay, we will pick up there. We've got to finish Two Towers because we're way far behind. Come on.